Title: Karen insists my driveway is hers. My new property survey proved she is lying. The county sheriff's deputy stood on my own driveway, reading a trespass notice with my name on it. Karen Halstead, HOA president, stood behind him, arms crossed, smiling like she'd already won. "This driveway belongs to the Meridian Oaks common area," she said. "You've been parking illegally for months. I had lived here 3 years. I had the deed. And I had just paid for a brand new survey." What she didn't know was that survey was sitting in my truck and it told a very different story. My name is Gideon Marsh. I'm 34, an electrician, and until that morning I believed HOA rules were just annoying. I bought my house on Larkspur Lane because it had a long driveway, room for my truck and my tools. Karen Halstead had run the Meridian Oaks HOA board for 11 years like it was her personal kingdom. Everyone said the same thing about her: "Don't fight Karen, she always finds a loophole to bury you in." I didn't want a war. I just wanted to park my truck. That wanted, apparently, was declaring war. It started small, the way these things always do. A letter about my grass being a half-inch too tall. Then a letter about my mailbox post being the wrong shade of black. Then one about my trash cans. Karen signed every letter personally, always citing Section 4.2c, like it was scripture handed down from God. My neighbor Dolores warned me over the fence. She went after the Petersons till they sold and moved to Ohio. I laughed it off. I figured a few warnings, a little annoyance, nothing worth losing sleep over. Then came the driveway letter, claiming my extended concrete pad encroached on HOA common property. I checked my closing documents. My deed clearly listed the driveway as part of my lot. I felt confident. I emailed Karen a photo of my deed. She replied in 4 minutes, "Deeds can be outdated. HOA plats supersede them." That sentence should have scared me more than it did. I still thought this was a simple misunderstanding. The first real skirmish happened on a Saturday morning when I found a bright orange sticker on my truck's windshield. "Vehicle on unauthorized HOA land, subject TO towing," it read, stamped with the HOA's official seal. I marched to the clubhouse. Karen was there, sipping coffee at her little folding table like a queen at court. 023, ma'am, this is my driveway. I have paperwork. I slid my deed across the table. She barely glanced at it. The plat map from 2003 shows different lot lines. I'll email you the map. The map she sent was blurry, hand-annotated, with a section circled in red pen reading, "Common Drive Easement." Something about that red circle felt wrong, too fresh, too convenient, like it had been drawn yesterday. I asked the county recorder's office for the original 2003 plat. They said they'd mail me a certified copy. Meanwhile, Karen posted a notice on the community Facebook group naming me as a repeat rule violator. Neighbors I'd waved to for years suddenly looked away when I passed. Karen's version of events spread fast. My fiancée, Renata, told me to just move my truck to avoid the fight. Part of me wanted to. But another part of me, the stubborn part, refused to be pushed off land I legally owned. That night I found a fine notice taped to my door, $200 for continued unauthorized parking. I paid it under protest, but I also started a folder. Every letter, every photo, every date, organized. 2 weeks later, the certified plat map arrived from the county. My driveway was entirely inside my own lot line. There was no common easement drawn anywhere near my property. Karen's red-circled map had been fabricated. I felt something shift in my chest, not fear anymore, but a cold, focused kind of anger. I brought the certified plat to the next HOA meeting, expecting an apology, or at least an admission. Karen barely looked at it. "That's an old survey. We're updating boundaries community-wide next year," she said smoothly. The room of homeowners murmured, unsure who to believe. Karen had a gift for sounding certain even while lying. "There is no boundary update on file with the county," I said. "I checked. There's no project, no permit." Karen's secretary, a quiet woman named Priya, glanced at me for just a second, like she wanted to say something. "We'll discuss this in executive session," Karen announced, ending the public portion of the meeting abruptly. Executive session, I later learned, was where Karen made every real decision, with no minutes, no witnesses. Driving home, I noticed a car idling outside my house. A home inspector, Karen had said, routine safety check. No inspection had been requested. No permit filed. Just a stranger with a clipboard photographing my property. I asked him directly who sent him. He hesitated, then said, "The HOA president arranged it." Standard procedure. Standard procedure for what, exactly? I hadn't requested anything. This felt less like oversight and more like surveillance. That night I called my cousin Denise, a paralegal, and told her everything. She went quiet for a long moment. "Gideon," she said, "this isn't just an HOA dispute anymore. This sounds like someone building a legal case against you." Her words sat heavy in my stomach. Karen wasn't just annoyed. Karen was preparing something bigger. I decided that night, if Karen wanted a paper war, I would outdocument her at her own game. I bought a small file cabinet. Every letter, every fine, every photo, every conversation, all logged with dates and times. For a few weeks, things went quiet. No new letters. No fines. I almost let myself relax. Renata said maybe Karen had backed off, embarrassed by the plat map mistake. I wasn't so sure. Dolores told me over the fence that quiet periods with Karen usually meant she was planning something worse. I started attending every HOA meeting, not to argue, but to watch, listen, and take careful notes. I noticed Karen controlled the agenda tightly, cutting off anyone who asked about finances or past violations. One evening, Priya lingered after a meeting and slipped me a folded piece of paper without a word. On it was a single sentence: "Check the HOA Reserve Fund audit from 3 years ago. Ask for it in writing." I didn't know what it meant yet, but I filed the note away, sensing it mattered more than I realized. The quiet ended fast. A new letter arrived. My driveway extension, built in full view of inspectors at closing, was unpermitted. The letter demanded I remove 8 feet of concrete within 30 days or face a lien on my home. A lien. Not a fine. An actual legal claim against my property, filed by a private homeowners association. I called a real estate attorney, Marcus Chen, who read the letter twice before setting it down slowly. "HOAs do have lien power in this state," he said, "but only for violations properly documented and legally noticed." Was this properly noticed? I asked. He shook his head. Not even close. This looks rushed. Sloppy. Almost desperate. Desperate was an interesting word. I hadn't considered that Karen might be under pressure of her own. Marcus agreed to represent me for a modest retainer, on one condition: I kept documenting everything obsessively. I requested, in writing, the HOA's financial records for the past 5 years, citing my rights as a dues-paying member. Karen's response came 2 days later: "Records are available for review, by appointment only, at the clubhouse office." When I arrived for my appointment, the office was locked and a sign said, "Closed for maintenance." I emailed Karen immediately. Her reply: "Unfortunate timing. We'll reschedule." No new date was ever offered. I filed a formal complaint with the state's HOA Oversight Division, citing denial of financial record access. 3 days later, a second inspector showed up, this time claiming my fence violated aesthetic guidelines. My fence had stood unchanged since I moved in. Nothing had triggered a sudden review, except my complaint. The pattern was becoming impossible to ignore. Every time I pushed back, a new violation magically appeared. Renata started keeping her own log too, timestamps on her phone every time a car idled outside our house. One night, a drone flew low over our backyard, hovering near our windows for almost 10 minutes. I filmed it from my porch. When I posted the footage in the community group, comments vanished within an hour. Someone was moderating that group aggressively, deleting anything critical of the board, especially of Karen herself. I realized then this wasn't one angry woman with a clipboard. This was a small, coordinated machine. The HOA scheduled a special hearing about my driveway, sending notice only 48 hours in advance. Marcus said that timeline likely violated the association's own bylaws, which required 10 days notice for hearings. We showed up anyway, Marcus at my side, folder of documents thick enough to need both hands. The clubhouse was packed, more neighbors than I'd ever seen at a meeting, buzzing with curiosity. Karen opened by reading a list of my supposed violations: unpermitted concrete, unauthorized parking, pattern of non-compliance. Marcus stood calmly and asked to see the original permit file for the community's driveway regulations, dated 2003. Karen said the file was being digitized and unavailable that evening. The same excuse, recycled and worn thin. Then Priya, the quiet secretary, did something none of us expected. She raised her hand from the back row. "I have a copy," she said softly. "I kept one, off the books, when the office computer crashed last year." The room went dead silent. Karen's smile flickered, just for a second, like a light bulb about to die. Priya handed the folder to Marcus. Inside was the real 2003 plat, official county stamp, no red circles, no lies. It showed exactly what my certified survey had shown: my driveway was fully inside my own property line. Karen tried to interject, calling the document unverified, but her voice had lost its usual iron confidence. A neighbor in the third row stood up. "Karen fined me for the same thing 2 years ago. I paid it." Another neighbor stood. Then another. Fines for driveways, for fences, for trees, all citing the same fake red circle map. The pattern that had haunted me alone suddenly belonged to a dozen people in that room, all at once. Karen's husband, sitting near the front, looked visibly pale, glancing at her like he hadn't known any of this. "This is a witch hunt," Karen snapped, her composure cracking at the edges for the first time in 11 years. "No," I said quietly. "It's a paper trail. And you built it yourself, letter by letter, fine by fine." Marcus requested the meeting be adjourned pending a formal review by the state HOA Oversight Board. The board, rattled and unsure, agreed. Karen stormed out before the vote was even fully counted. Outside, in the parking lot, Priya caught up to me, hands shaking slightly as she spoke. "I should have said something years ago," she admitted. "I was scared of losing my part-time clubhouse job." "You said something tonight," I told her. "That's what mattered." She managed a small, exhausted smile. Then Priya said something that changed everything I thought I understood about this fight. "The reserve fund," she whispered. "It's not just about fines. Karen's been moving money for years. I have the ledgers." My stomach dropped. This was never really about my driveway. My driveway had just been the excuse. Denise's earlier warning echoed in my head: this sounds like someone building a legal case. I'd had it backwards. Karen wasn't building a case against me. She was building a smokescreen to hide something much bigger. Every fine, every lien threat, every distraction had one purpose: keep homeowners fighting each other, not looking at the books. I realized the driveway dispute was never personal. It was cover. And I had almost fallen for it completely. For a week, nothing happened publicly. Karen didn't show up at the clubhouse. Her usual emails stopped entirely. Rumors swirled that she was on vacation, though her car sat in her driveway every single morning. Renata said the silence felt heavier than any letter Karen had ever sent us before. Priya reached out again, this time by encrypted email, saying she wanted to meet somewhere away from the neighborhood. We met at a diner 2 towns over. She brought a flash drive and a look of genuine fear on her face. "If this gets out wrong," she said, "Karen will say I stole it. I need this done properly, legally." Marcus agreed to handle the ledger as evidence only through proper legal channels, protecting Priya as a cooperating witness. The flash drive held 5 years of HOA financial statements, reconciled against bank records Priya had quietly saved. Numbers didn't lie the way Karen did. Nearly $90,000 in reserve funds simply had no paper trail. Landscaping invoices were paid twice. A security consultant contract paid monthly to a company with no listed employees. Marcus traced that company's registered address to a small house, Karen's sister's house, 2 counties away. My hands went cold reading that. This wasn't sloppy bookkeeping. This was a slow, deliberate siphoning of neighbors' money. We reported the findings to the state HOA Oversight Division and, separately, to the county district attorney's office. Within days, an investigator named Detective Ruiz called, asking for a full meeting with Marcus and me together. Ruiz said similar reserve fund complaints had trickled in from 2 other communities Karen had managed years earlier. She moves around every decade or so, Ruiz explained. New community, new board, same tricks, different victims. That detail landed hard. This wasn't Karen's first kingdom. It might not even be her worst one. Karen, sensing something was wrong, suddenly resurfaced, announcing an emergency board meeting for that Thursday night. The agenda, posted late, focused entirely on me again, continued violations by homeowner Gideon Marsh, lien vote. She was trying to force a lien vote before the investigation could gain any real momentum against her. Marcus called it a Hail Mary. Rush the vote, punish me publicly, distract the community from the ledgers. I almost admired the audacity, even as fury burned steady in my chest at the sheer nerve of it. We decided not to tip our hand. Let Karen hold her meeting. Let her believe she still controlled the narrative. Thursday night, the clubhouse filled again, tension crackling in the air like static before a storm. Karen opened smoothly, professionally, reading fine amounts and lean language in her practiced, unshakable voice. All in favor of authorizing a lien against the Marsh property, she said, raise your hand. Only 3 hands rose, her closest allies on the board. The rest of the room stayed still, watching. The motion fails, the treasurer muttered, visibly uncomfortable, refusing to meet Karen's eyes. Karen's jaw tightened. Then we'll revisit it next session, she said, already scanning for her next move. That's when Marcus stood and asked to address the board under new business, holding a thin manila folder. Before we adjourn, he said, I'd like to discuss reserve fund discrepancies totaling approximately $90,000. The room went utterly silent, the kind of silence that feels loud in your ears, pressing against your skull. Karen's face didn't move, but her knuckles whitened around her gavel, gripping it like a lifeline. This is inappropriate, she said. Financial matters require proper notice. Her voice, for once, wavered slightly. State law allows homeowners to raise financial concerns with reasonable notice, Marcus replied. This was submitted in writing yesterday. A neighbor near the front, an accountant by trade, asked to see the numbers projected on the meeting screen. The treasurer, cornered, agreed. Line by line, duplicate invoices and phantom security payments appeared on the wall for everyone. Gasps rippled through the room. Someone's grandmother, in the back row, said, "That's my special assessment money," out loud. Karen tried damage control. "There are explanations for all of this," she said, though none followed. "Explain the security consultant contract, then," Marcus said, "registered to a residential address in Ashford County." Karen's composure cracked visibly now, a thin sheen of sweat catching the fluorescent clubhouse lighting. "That's a legitimate vendor," she snapped, too quickly, too defensively, the practiced calm completely gone. "A vendor with no employees, no website and a residential address matching your sister's home," Marcus said evenly. The room erupted into murmurs, sharp and disbelieving, neighbors turning to each other in stunned recognition. Karen slammed her gavel. "This meeting is adjourned," she shouted, but nobody moved to leave. "Detective Ruiz has already opened a financial investigation," Marcus added calmly. "This board is legally required to cooperate." At the mention of Ruiz's name, Karen's face drained of color entirely, like a switch had been flipped. She grabbed her purse and walked briskly toward the exit, saying nothing, refusing to look at anyone. The next morning, a certified letter arrived at my house, not from Karen, but from the state HOA Oversight Board. It announced a full compliance audit of Meridian Oaks, freezing all pending fines and lien actions immediately. My driveway dispute, on paper, simply ceased to exist. There had never been a valid claim to begin with. Renata hugged me so tight I nearly dropped my coffee. "It's actually over," she whispered, disbelieving. But I remembered Ruiz's warning, Karen moves around every decade. This wasn't over until she couldn't move again. Priya texted me a single line, "She's already looking at communities 2 states away. Don't let her run." I forwarded everything, ledgers, plat maps, fine histories, to Ruiz's office, formally requesting they act before Karen relocated. Marcus filed an emergency motion requesting a temporary asset freeze on Karen's personal accounts, citing flight risk. A judge granted it within 48 hours, citing credible evidence of ongoing financial misconduct. Karen's lawyer, hastily hired, argued the freeze was premature and unjust. The judge disagreed, calmly, decisively. Meanwhile, 3 other former HOA communities Karen had led came forward, echoing eerily similar stories. Missing reserve funds. Fabricated violations. Fake plat maps. It was a playbook, refined over more than a decade. Detective Ruiz called it one of the more organized HOA fraud patterns his division had seen in years. The county DA's office announced formal charges: embezzlement, forgery of public land records and fraud against a homeowners association. Karen was arrested at her own home, on her own perfectly manicured lawn, in full view of the neighbors she'd fined. Dolores told me later that half the street watched from their windows, coffee mugs in hand, utterly silent. I didn't watch. I was at work, wiring a new panel, when Renata texted me 3 simple words: "It's happening." I drove home fast, hands tight on the wheel, heart pounding with something between vindication and disbelief. By the time I got there, Karen's car was gone, a single crime scene sticker sealed across her front door. The HOA's remaining board members, shaken and humbled, called an emergency meeting to address the community directly. The treasurer, visibly relieved to finally speak freely, admitted Karen had pressured him into signing blank authorization forms for years. "I was afraid of her," he said. "Everyone was. She made sure of that, every single meeting." Priya was thanked publicly for the first time, applause rippling through a room that had once ignored her completely. She cried a little, not from sadness, but from the strange relief of finally being believed. I stood at the back, folder still in hand, feeling the odd hollowness that comes after a long fight ends. A neighbor I barely knew came up and shook my hand. "You did what none of us had the guts to do." I wanted to say it wasn't just me, it was Priya, Marcus, Denise, Ruiz, a dozen quiet people finally speaking up. The community voted, unanimously, to dissolve the current board and appoint an independent interim manager for 6 months. New bylaws were drafted requiring public financial audits, recorded executive sessions and third-party verification of all violations. Karen's name was removed from every HOA document, every sign, every plaque she'd had installed with her own title on it. I remember standing in the clubhouse afterward, staring at the blank space where her portrait used to hang. It felt strange, almost anticlimactic, the way real justice often does, quiet, procedural and utterly unglamorous. Renata squeezed my hand. "No more red circles," she said, half joking, half relieved. I laughed for the first time in months. That night, I finally took down the little file cabinet from my office, months of evidence no longer needed daily. I didn't throw it away, though. Some habits, once fear teaches them to you, are hard to fully unlearn. Marcus called with an update. Karen's arraignment was set, bail set high given the flight risk finding earlier. He warned me the case could take a year or more to resolve fully through the courts. I told him I didn't mind waiting. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of what came next. Detective Ruiz mentioned the case might set precedent for how the state audits HOA boards going forward. "Sometimes," he said, "it takes one stubborn guy with a driveway to expose something much bigger." 3 weeks later, the preliminary hearing began and I sat in the gallery beside Priya and Marcus. Karen arrived in a plain gray suit, no longer polished, no longer commanding, just a woman facing consequences. The prosecutor laid out the timeline meticulously: forged plat maps, phantom vendors, years of quietly drained reserve funds. Exhibit after exhibit appeared on the courtroom screen, the same red-circled map, the same fake security invoices. Karen's attorney tried to argue mismanagement, not malice. The judge asked for an explanation of the sisters' shell company. There was no good answer. The silence in that courtroom stretched long and damning. Then came the twist none of us expected. Karen's husband testified, cooperating fully, describing years of hidden bank statements. "I found the accounts by accident," he said quietly. "I didn't know how deep it went until recently." He described sleepless nights, arguments, a marriage strained by secrets he hadn't fully understood until the arrest. His testimony corroborated everything: dates, amounts, the shell company's true purpose, laid out without a single lie. Karen stared at him from the defense table, something between fury and heartbreak crossing her face for just a moment. It was the first time I saw her look truly human, not a villain, just a person cornered by her own choices. The prosecutor called Priya next. She spoke steadily, describing years of quiet fear, of finally choosing to act. "I kept records because I was scared," she said, "but eventually I realized silence was its own kind of harm. Then I was called to testify, describing the driveway letters, the fabricated map, the drone, the sudden inspections." "Did you ever believe the driveway dispute was genuinely about property lines?" the prosecutor asked me directly. "Not anymore," I said. "I think it was never about the driveway. It was about keeping me distracted." Karen's attorney, in cross-examination, tried to paint me as vindictive, obsessed, chasing a personal vendetta against her. "I asked for one thing," I said. "An honest answer." She gave me 11 years of paperwork instead. That line landed harder than I expected. Even the judge allowed himself the faintest flicker of a smile. The defense rested weakly, offering no real rebuttal to the ledgers, the testimony, or the forged county map. Closing arguments were brief. The prosecutor simply replayed the numbers: $91,000, 11 years, one shell company. The jury deliberated for just under 4 hours before returning with their verdict late that afternoon. Guilty on all counts: embezzlement, forgery of public records and fraud against a homeowners association. Karen's face went pale, then blank, staring straight ahead as the verdict was read aloud, word by word. Her husband, sitting 3 rows behind her now instead of beside her, didn't move, didn't speak, didn't look away. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed briefly, drawn by the sheer scale of the small-town HOA fraud case. I gave one short statement: "I just wanted to park my truck. I never expected any of this." Sentencing came 6 weeks later: restitution of the full $91,000, 5 years probation and a permanent ban from any HOA board role in the state. Karen was also ordered to personally repay every documented fine she had wrongfully issued, including my own $200. The check arrived in my mailbox with no note attached, just her signature, shakier than it used to be. I didn't cash it right away. I sat with it on my kitchen table for almost a week, just looking at it. Renata asked why I hesitated. "It doesn't feel like winning," I told her. "It just feels like it's finally over." The interim HOA manager sent a community-wide letter formally closing the driveway matter, citing my original certified survey as fully valid. Priya eventually took over as the association's part-time office coordinator, this time with real authority and real protections. Dolores told me the Facebook group finally felt normal again, actual conversations, not fear dressed up as etiquette. My driveway still sits exactly where it always did, cracked in the corner, my truck parked on it every single night. But Karen lost everything that mattered to her: her title, her reputation, her marriage strained to its breaking point, her freedom to control others. I lost something too: 11 months of peace, some trust in neighbors, a little of the easy comfort I once took for granted. Justice came, satisfying and complete, but it came at a cost neither of us walked away from unchanged.